Welcome to the Film Trooper podcast with your host, Scott McMahon.
Hi, and yes, welcome to the Film Trooper podcast, and I am your host, Scott McMahon. And this episode is sponsored by the book, How to Make and Sell Your Film Online and Survive the Hollywood Implosion While Doing It. It's available as a paperback, as a Kindle book, as well as an audiobook. In fact, you can get the audiobook for free if you go to survivetheimplosion.com and sign up with Audible for 30 days free. Again, that's at survivetheimplosion.com. Before I get started with today's episode, I want to give a shout out to a few people who have left 5-star ratings and review over on iTunes for the Film Trooper podcast. I want to thank Kyle and Stomp Tokyo for doing such a thing. Thank you so much. And another thing I wanted to mention, I got some feedback from a friend of mine who's been following Film Trooper podcast for a while, and he said that, just a little tidbit, little critique for me, which is to, loosen up. So I was like, okay, loosen up. So my response to my friend is, F you. I'm just kidding. He's a friend of mine. He'll totally get that. So there you go. There's me loosening up a little bit. So we're going to get right into it. This is part 3 of 4 episodes that are focusing on story and storytelling, but trying to do it in a little different way. So if you recall in episode number 102, which was 2 episodes ago, I interviewed Patrick Moreau of Still Motion as we talked about his Muse storytelling program that he and Still Motion had created. And they offer a membership platform to help other filmmakers tell better stories through their Muse program. What's unique about the Muse approach, it really helps the filmmaker who has to shoot wedding videos, documentaries, and someone who's doing commercial work with high-end clients. Since a lot of these jobs can't take advantage of the traditional narrative script writing process that we're taught over and over how to do, Still Motion has had to use research from psychologists and other leading educators to get to the heart of why story matters and how to apply it when you're in these sort of different filmmaking situations. Again, you can go back to episode number 102 to listen to that interview. Then, just last week, I released part 2 of the series with New York Times best-selling author Ian Desher, who wrote the William Shakespeare Star Wars books. Yeah, again, that's right. The William Shakespeare Star Wars books. There's 6 of them that he wrote, and there might be a 7th one if they commission him to do the Force Awakens. Although Ian isn't necessarily writing film scripts per se, his journey of pitching his idea to a publisher, getting the approval to write the books, and then becoming a New York Times bestselling author sounds like a dream come true, right? But I was very interested in getting the perspective of, is it all that it really appears? Because becoming a New York Times bestselling author is like winning an award at Sundance for any filmmaker, right? You think you'd be all set. But again, it's not all that it appears. So check that out in the last episode, which is number 103. But today I have part 3 of the storytelling series with filmmaker and writer Brooks Elms. Now, Brooks actually reached out to me to let me know that I screwed up on a bit of reporting about Gold Circle. So I was trying to relay a story that was initially reported where the producers of the indie hit My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which made like over $368 million worldwide off a small budget of $5 million. Well, apparently the producers, being Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson, were owed all this money. So they sued the 3 companies that provided the financing for the film back in 2007. Now, one of those companies was Gold Circle Films. So Gold Circle has gone on to produce like Pitch Perfect, those movies, as well as I think it was originally backed by a billionaire from Gateway Computers. So anyhow, the Hanks filed a lawsuit in 2007, but they dropped the suit in 2012. And I didn't quite report that correctly. I kind of just left it out there saying, just because a movie made almost $400 million worldwide, you still may have to sue the company to get your money. So Brooks wanted me to make sure that I was making it very clear that the lawsuit was dropped and that Gold Circle has definitely complied by paying the producers like well over $44 million profit, and who knows what other back-end stuff went down. So the reason, Brooks was emailing me and why this is so important is because Brooks himself had just sold a script to Gold Circle a few years ago. And that's what we're going to find out in today's episode, is what we can learn from his story about what it takes to write a script and get it sold. And it looks like the movie's going into production very soon here. So sit back and enjoy my interview with filmmaker and writer Brooks Elms on the Film Trooper podcast. I would love to actually hear sort of like the quick journey, your little hero's journey from, making 50 short films when you were before 18, going to NYU, what that experience was like, and eventually, working to become not only a filmmaker but a screenwriter that got a project, sold, and what that experience is like and getting representation. Because a lot of people I know probably listening is like, that's what they're dreaming. Like, if I can get representation, what is it, or what the steps I need to get, to make that happen?
Yeah. Well, let's see. As a kid, I was, involved in plays and stuff. I think I actually wrote a play in like 3rd or 4th grade, and I even had the sense to kind of, because the teacher who was our music teacher who put on the productions, I knew to kind of cater to him, so I named the main character after him. So I'm thinking that he maybe would be more likely to actually get behind us so we could produce this play, which I'm sure was absolutely terrible, but it was fun for kids. And so I did that, and there was messing around with my neighbors. We would a play here and there, just kind of goofing around. Then in 8th grade, I took this Super 8 animation class, which was. It was like crack to me. Not that I've actually tried crack. I imagine how crack would be. I mean, it was a 42-minute period, and literally it felt like 3 minutes. It was so amazingly delightful for me. And we made, 3 or 4 Super 8 films, and we had this character, and we kind of had him as a series of different. At one point we were studying Dracula, and we had him dressed up like a vampire, and then another time he was a surfer, and then there was a fantasy one where he was a warrior of some sort. Anyway, so I did that, and so it was always like insanely satisfying and exciting for me. And then when I was 15 years old, my buddies came up to me and said, "Hey, we're making a karate film. Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Hell yeah, let's go." So I started in that, and the way me and those guys worked was very collaborative. It wasn't there was no like director and his vision. It was a group of guys who were really into it, making movies. So we made that one. It was called Duel of the Bloody Warriors, and when we showed it to friends, that's when the exhibition bug really hit me, because my friend was rolling around on the floor, dying laughing, and I was like, wow, as much fun as I had making it, seeing that guy respond is just as satisfying in a different way. So we were totally hooked. So then I did a lot of experiments. When I say 50, that's kind of a generic number, but I was always doing experiments, so that counts some of those experiments. But in terms of like pretty serious films, that group of us probably made like 7 or 8 narratives. The crowning achievement was this one that was an hour long. It was called The Unstoppables. It was a parody of The Untouchables. It was. It was an hour long. We had 100 people that came to our high school auditorium to see it. The mayor was there. We shot we would shoot all over this small town, and we were in the law, in the courts and everywhere. We just were. And the other thing is that at the time there was no internet, but they did have local, like cable access.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they allowed us to show our movies on TV. So you could flip around and actually see our movies on TV. And sometimes people would, stop us on the street and say, "Oh yeah, you're those crazy kids doing those shows." So it was awesome. And because my town had a lot of, I grew up in East Hampton, which is one of the Hamptons that people have heard of. And because there's a lot of money out there, the high school was really well funded. So we had our own TV station. So we did this weekly news show, which was an absolute blast. We probably did 20, 30 episodes of that. And I probably did that for 2 or 3 different years. And then my senior year, there was a class that was like, I forgot what they called it, but basically it was time for me to make movies in my friend's class. And we kind of knew more about the teacher, about because they just got he was a coach. He was like, all right, let's throw him in there. So he got the job, and we basically, I think we did the news show out of that class, but we were also making our own stuff. So it was just, and then I went to NYU, and I would, make movies at NYU, which was great, and then I would go home in the summer break and then make more movies. So it was what I did for fun, and then the big change at NYU was, I was around people who were film literate, because I had almost no film literacy before that. It was all whatever was the popular, blockbuster movie that came out, and I would see it 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times because there was nothing else to do in a small town. And but anything that was, that came out before like 80. Well, I guess I saw films when I was a kid, but basically I didn't know any of the 70s movies or anything like that. So I went to NYU in the early 90s, and that's when I really started getting introduced to the, the early Scorsese stuff and, all the 70s movies, which are spectacular. And I love that. And the other thing is that it just socially, when other people were talking about films, they were like, "Oh, this film," and they could name the director, and they would name 5 of his films, and I was like, "What?" I had no idea what they're talking about. I made a ton, but I didn't have any of that, so that was great. So that really kind of elevated my game to kind of say, okay, and I knew that the feedback we were getting from people that were more serious about it were like, "Look, your ambition is great, but you're making parodies, and people, they're not." People don't hold that in very high regard in general, unless you're really, really funny, which we weren't. We were kind of funny, but not that funny. And so then I gravitated towards a more sort of personal style and telling more personal stories. And then right out of NYU, when I was 22, I made a feature that was based on my experiences playing soccer at NYU, because I was also into sports, and I was actually captain of the NYU soccer team. So I made a movie that was about this soccer team that was kind of better at partying after the games than they were on the field. It wasn't like the Bad News Bears. It was more kind of nuanced than that. But it was, I thought, for what it was, I thought it was kind of an interesting film. And the funny thing is that, but it's really young. I made it when I was 22, so it's like a student feature. Mm-hmm. But it was pretty ambitious for that. We shot 30 days in New York, in Manhattan, in New Jersey, in the Bronx, in Queens, and so it was like 30 locations in 30 days. Everybody was like in their early 20s, and so it was sort of a big scale student film. And there's a scene from that movie that has over 1 million views on YouTube, and 300, 400 people watch it every single day. It's a sex scene, which is partly why. But it's not just it's not just craziness. It's a guy. The main character tells a story about how he got together with this girl, and then some of it's true and some of it's not. So it's kind of, but it shows early glimpses of my style. There's a terrible transfer of it and whatever, but amazingly, again, more people watch that one clip every day than probably saw the whole feature.
Oh, interesting. What's the name of the film again?
It's called Snapshots from a 500 season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so 500 is, in sports terms, you win half, you lose half. So it was kind of and then the guy was, the movie's about the guy kind of, it's like a coming-of-age story in a sense, him coming to terms with himself. But it has the feel of how college felt to me. So I'm proud of it for what it was. And it did, there's a guy, John Pearson, who was really active in the scene at the time. He was a producer's rep, and he helped discover Kevin Smith and Richard Linklater.
Oh, okay.
And Spike Lee. He had this marketing workshop that was really cool. He invited my film to that, and so it was in the space. But what I did actually, again, going back to the exhibition part. So after we finished it, and I didn't get into like Sundance, I didn't get into the top festivals, but I knew that there was some value in this film. So I did a college tour, and I did what I called the New York City's guerrilla cinema. I showed it for a month in an off Broadway space. My film, and then my buddy's film, because there was a lead actor who was in both films, and so we showed my movie on like odd nights and his movie on even nights. I did it for a month. It was great. It was so again, the exhibition part really is equally as fun for me as the making part. So that was that, and then I made that brought me to my like mid-20s, and then I was working on an independent film after that. It was sort of like it was a found footage film. At that point, I had no more money because I had some money that I could spend.
Yeah.
On this. I did. And then I didn't have any money, so I did a found footage disaster film. This was before Blair Witch, before Cloverfield. And the idea was good, but I really didn't know anything about story structure because I just had up and made films, so my stuff was pretty good as a director. But it wasn't as sort of a storyteller holding attention in a longer period. I didn't know anything about the structure, and I was kind of resistant about learning. And ultimately, the film was kind of fun. So we got some actors, and we had the idea, and we're like, all right, let's shoot it, and we'll figure it out as we go. And it was pretty terrible. There were some things that were okay, but in general, I really needed to know about the story structure, and I didn't at that point. So then I took a couple years off from the business, and then realized that I really missed the business, and that's when I came across these. While I was taking time off, I was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I was reading these psychology books because I just was. I was fascinated by psychology, and I was fascinated by the school that I came across, where the kids could kind of do whatever they wanted. There was no tests, there was no grades, everything was completely initiated by the students themselves. It was like they created their own existence, and the school was basically a mini community, and they could vote on the rules of the community, on which teachers get hired and fired, on how the rules were enforced. I mean, it was bizarre to me coming from a traditional school background, but it was fascinating, and it resonated with me because that's where I was in my life. I was taking time off. I had my bills paid for a little bit, so I could kind of do whatever I wanted, and it was exciting and overwhelming to have that much freedom. And so the school was like, this is really interesting. And then I missed being in the film business, so I wrote a fictional movie about a traditional school teacher who comes across these crazy schools, and it really changes his mind about authority in his own sort of personal life. So that was a movie called Schooled, and I came out to L.A., and I wrote that very leisurely, and showed it, and then edited it very leisurely, and then showed it around, and it did okay. Played all over the world. People who were into sort of radical education really liked it, and so it had its fans and its champions, and it was fun. But it certainly wasn't the thing that the industry was clamoring, for. And then at that point, the recession hit, so any sort of investments that I had kind of got gutted, and I started a family. So I was like, oh my gosh, now I can't make obscure films that are fun for me. I got to make broader stuff, and then I got to also solve that question that happened, back in the structure of Schooled was okay. It was kind of basic hero's journey stuff. He goes off into the journey, he learns, and he comes back, right? But it wasn't more nuanced than that. So I needed to know what they were doing in Hollywood that was different. And that's when I focused on just screenwriting. And I came across Blake Snyder's approach. He's the Save the Cat guy. And I went to his seminar while he was still alive, and he was just really fascinating. And that approach for me completely blew my mind because I already knew how to make movies. I had been doing it my whole life, but I didn't know how to hold attention, 10 minutes in, 30 minutes in, 50 minutes in. What were those turning points? Why were they important? Why did so many, because part of me was resisting it and going, well, yeah, but all these terrible movies that I don't like have those turning points, and it's not making them better, which I think is a good point. But anything that's working really well tends to have these grooves. It's almost like it's really about holding attention. And when you tell somebody something, blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden you turn the story, and then you turn the story, it accelerates interest and deepens it. And so, for me, Blake Snyder's way of communicating that was just, it cracked my mind open, and it was amazing. And then from that point on, not only was I could now intellectually understand how I was writing and the structure of it, but he's got a process, or at least I took from what he was doing as a process. So I was working like a machine. So all that sort of energy I had about making films in general as a kid, I now was turning into my work as a screenwriter. So I was pumping out 2 scripts a year, bang, bang, bang. And then I ran into this, had a meeting with my buddy from NYU, who produced a bunch of different films, and one of them was Cabin Fever, and a bunch of them since then. And I was trying to see if he was interested in one of these scripts that I'd written, and he said, well, that's not really my sort of thing, but why don't you write me like a genre movie? And I was like, well, I'm not all that interested in genre movies, and I had another producer who made Schooled with me. He was at that meeting, and we kind of walked away from the meeting, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? Write this guy's got a lot of connections. He'll hook you up. Write a genre movie for him. And I was like, resisting. I was like, all right, well, let me figure out if I can. So then the idea was, okay, can I thread the needle? Can I make something that takes these structure ideas that I was then newly fascinated with, and was playing to the genre beats that are required in broader storytelling, and yet still was grounded and personal and interesting enough for me to care about it. Because if I really didn't care about it, I can't write it. And then so the idea came for this alien invasion movie, and I think the original seed of the idea was actually I was stuck in traffic on the 405, and I was like, it would be a really interesting situation if, it was almost like that Fellini film. There's that traffic in the Fellini film, and they're all stuck. And it was kind of like, well, what if there was a modern twist on that, and they're stuck in traffic, and these aliens came down? That would be kind of interesting. And then I talked about it with one of my writing partners, and we came up with this concept of a group of commuters stuck on the L train in Chicago in a blizzard, and only the blizzard turns out to be a cover for an alien invasion. And the type of aliens these were unlike anything we'd ever seen. My one partner was really good in the sci-fi space with coming up with very gruesome and interesting stuff. And so it was fun. And then the characters are really grounded, and so we wrote it with the idea to make it ourselves at whatever, $1 million, $2 million, something like that. And then my buddy from NYU, this guy Evan Ostrowski, he said, you know what, this is really good. I think I might be able to get it set up on a bigger scale. And then we said, well, great. And he walked it into his contacts at UTA. They loved it, and and then ultimately it got sold. I mean, so that's and then that movie is should be in production any week now. Actually, so probably we're doing this right now in January of 2016. I'm told within the next month or two it should go into production.
Because it was sold. So it was sold. If I back in 2014, right?
Well, yeah. So if you want to go into the gory details of actually selling the script, which is good, because in my mind I was like, hey, I sold the script, limos, money, new assignments, blah blah blah, and the reality has been it's just been super crazy, amazingly slow, which is frustrating on two levels. One, because as you can probably tell, my tempo is up. I like to go. I like to make stuff. I like to bang it out. Creatively, that's my rhythm. And then the other part is financially. I got a family to support. So it's like, look, if I do something and it's good enough for you to get involved, then let's pay me. Let's get that part done. So, but what ended up happening was, so we'll back it up. It's like, I guess, 2.5 years at this point, or 3. So. Evan walks us into UTA. We like those agents. Those guys are great. They're all right, let's go. Let's send this out. So it goes out to the town, and everybody passes. But we get a meeting. We get one meeting. And if you could have one meeting in Hollywood, what would it be? And for me, it might be, Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' company. And that's what we got. So it was awesome. So we went to his company, which is a really interesting space, and met with 2 of his executives. They loved the script, and they're like, it's great, blah, blah, blah. It's not quite right for us because it's too similar to Cloverfield, blah, 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 but keep us in mind, sort of a meeting. And then we also pitched him something else, and they kind of liked that. And so, it was a good contact, but that was about it. So, Ridley Scott's company supposedly liked it too, but we didn't meet with them, but we heard good things that they liked. So, and that was it. So like, okay, well, I guess we'll go back to making it ourselves. And then Evan ran into a guy he knows from Bender Spink, and they were looking for this exact sort of concept. And I don't think they were able to crack script on the sort of similar concept that they were going for, but he loved what we did. So he got on board. So Bender Spink was now on board along with Evan, and then we attached a director, this guy Clark Baker, who had made a short film. I mean, our film was in some ways, aliens attacking a train, a commuter train. he made a short film that was an alien attacking a plane, and it was so well received. Paramount picked that up and put it into development. So Clark was newly on the studio list for directors. He was a really smart guy, great dude to work with, and had some excellent ideas. He came in. We polished the script up a little bit so it was more aligned with his vision, and then we went back, and then we made a rip-o-matic, and then we went back out to the town with that. But it was basically the same concept, same script. It's funny the way Hollywood works. But so we go back out to the thing, and again, everybody passes except one company, and this is Gold Circle, and they were known back in the day for My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Right.
They do like 2 or 3 movies a year. They're known more recently for Pitch Perfect and the sequel, and I think they did Haunting in Connecticut. They're pretty active and very hands-on, and they loved the first half, which was mostly on this commuter train and these people getting attacked by these really wicked aliens. And again, no, our whole movie was mostly on the train, because we were thinking of making it ourselves, so keeping the cost down. And he said, no, we want it bigger. I want this to be a lot bigger. So we were like, my agents were like, great, bigger means more money. So I was like, okay, fine. So and I was concerned that it might be, that it might kind of lose some of its integrity. But to the credit of everybody that came on, Bender, Spink, and Clark, and Gold Circle, all their notes were really, really good. It was really that same thing. It was a matter of, okay, how do you take something and make it broadly appealing but also true? And it's really hard to do. And they were great in really, being steadfast about saying, no, I think you can make it either more broad or more personal, and keep going. So it was great. And so I think on paper it's wonderful. So I'm really proud of it. I think it can be a really special film. I'm hoping. Oh, and then finally, so back it up. So they said, basically make it bigger, have the ending be a little bit different. And then we pitched a few different ways to do the ending. They said, great, okay, let's do this. And that was 2 years ago or something like that. And then, but we had a kind of a deal, right? And then, there was like an option that happened later. And then, but then we wrote a treatment to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page, and we'd write the treatment, and then they get back to us, a month or 2 later and give us notes, and we'd bust out a treatment in a couple weeks, and they'd get back to us in a couple months. Gold Circle's an awesome company, but they're great because they tend to make everything they get involved in, but they're also very hands-on, so it goes slower. I probably took 8 months or 9 months just to, and that was only 3 or 4 drafts of the treatment, and then that was done, and then and then we started on the script itself, and again, 3-4 more drafts of the script, and then finally they said great, and then at that point, that was about a year ago, they said signed off on the script. This is great. This is what we wanted. And then at that point, they basically they did storyboards. They've been budgeting for special effects. And, things just take time. This person's got to get back to that person and blah, blah, blah. And
right.
So, anyway, we're told, and then in that time, our deal, we get paid the significant money once it goes into production. So until that time, we got a little bit of money for the option, to give them the option to make it into a film. But when they actually purchase a screenplay, that's when the real money's released. So all that's really important for everybody to know if they're interested in the screenwriting game, the spec market, because it's I think it's fairly typical. I think that, and in fact, I believe Clark Baker's short film that was bought 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if not more, that still hasn't gone into production. The wheels turn slowly, and partly it's not, there's frustration. You're like, oh man, what are they doing? Blah, blah, blah. But partly it's the nature of it. It's like people are spending a lot of money on this. You want to get it right. You have one chance to get it right for the most part. You want to make sure it's creatively all set, and you want to make sure the team involved is and you're talking about a very large team. So it's there's a lot of moving parts. It has to be done right, and and it's kind of like big scale construction projects too. These things have delays, so it's the nature of the beast, which is understandable, but it's also difficult at the same time if you're trying to feed your family. So luckily, I've been able to get writing assignments in the interim, just on the heat of because what happens is you have the movies that come out and the credits and then that reaction. Then you have the industry has its own sort of
radar,
awareness.
Yeah.
So they people know that people have read the script all over town. People know that we're this guy. They know that we're connected to that. So that heat level gets us meetings and gets us, into rooms to be able to pitch on assignments that we wouldn't had it not got to that point.
What have you noticed about sort of the pitching process? Were you prepared prior to going to these meetings through friends, or have you been learning on the way in terms of like how does a room work in terms of the pitching process?
It's a great question, and actually reminds me of a time back at NYU when I was pitching my third year film, not the one before my senior thesis, and I got there. I got up in front of my NYU classmates, and the classic joke about NYU film students is how many NYU film students does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, one, but then the other 29 will tell you how they would have screwed it in differently. So anyway, there was a lot of that, and partly it's just being young and being easily threatened and competitive and all that stuff. But that being said, I actually liked a lot my classmates, but there was a time when I was pitching to this group of people and felt that kind of competitive whatever, but I also felt like, you know what? This is it. This is my element. And it was really just a way of, it's just telling the story. If I'm telling you the story of my career right now, or I'm telling the story of, what happened at the post office, it's that. It's really as simple as that, and it's just, but it's, not only is it just, it's a story that I care about, so I'm happy to share. So, on a basic level, like how do you pitch, it really should be that. It's if I care enough about it to be in that room in the first place, it just comes from that space. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was at the pitch conference session at the American Film Market put on by Stephanie Palmer from Good in a Room, and she had Tobin Armbrust and Cassian Elwes there, and it's interesting. They have this thing where people just get up, and kudos to them for the courage to in front of a crowd to pitch their story, because you're getting to see in a live setting what a pitch room would be like to two prominent producers. And it's really fascinating how god awful some of the pitches were. And meaning that yes, the nerves and stuff like that, but what you see from an outsider's perspective, you're like, people are coming in. There's certain people that were they would lead you down the path of the story, and then they would switch it. Like all of a sudden, there's like this magical element, and that totally would throw off like the producers. Like, whoa, what? Like I was going down. I thought the story was this, and now it's this, and so that was that. One of the great comments from Stephanie Palmer is that it's helpful to even state the genre before you start, because again, like. By at least letting the producers know, like, this is a sci-fi thriller, sci-fi comedy, or it's a comedy, or whatever it might be, they're like, okay, so when you tell the story, they're in that mindset a little bit better. It helps, because at the same time, there was a lot of people that came in like almost over-prepared. Like they weren't talking about the story. They were talking about the production. Like, here's the poster, we have this much reach, or, this is our marketing plan, like all this kind of stuff. And they were very quickly to squash it, to say, we are at the story stage. There's other people that when the team gets built, the marketing team and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have their input in it. And it raises red flags when a producing team comes in too prepared and have too much stuff, because it doesn't allow sort of the freedom or leverage for the team that the producer puts together to have them do their expertise or their involvement. And so the people that actually won, that have the greatest impact, was somebody who just came in who had conviction and belief in the story they wanted to share, and just told the story. And those were the most effective pitches. So it wasn't like there's another guy had come in that was talking about all the awards he had won, whatever it might be. So you could tell like the insecurity part of it. And I thought it was just fascinating. Like you were mentioning, like, I have to believe in the story. I have to be, connected to it. It has to be authentic. And I guess that's what a lot of these producers in those rooms, they just want to hear, like, is it a good story? Does it have a hook? Is there something I could jump in there? I could kind of see it. It's very clear. It's visual. And I believe in the person telling me the story. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it was really, really fascinating.
My thinking about this is yes, it's related to pitching, but it really goes back to a different skill set, which is really primal, and it's there's two pieces to it. One is project selection. What should I write next? What should I make next as a film? And in a sense, if I'm going to a pitching situation in that case where they know nothing, which project should I pitch in that context? And then what parts of those stories are? Well, that's the first part. So which one to pick? And that's a huge decision to make as a creator. And it's all kind of there's a whole sort of group of thinking. There's a lot of, it's a choice. It's a thought process in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Project what? So that's important, and that needs to be dialed in. And there's a whole kind of ways to approach it. And then once you have the project selected, you think it's the right one for me to write next as a spec, or make as an independent film, or pitch in a pitch fest. Then the next step is what's the log line? What's the concept? And that's, again, something I got from Blake Snyder's Save the Cat approach that was amazing, because I always was so resistant. I've got this film, it's 90 minutes, how can I boil it down to this one line? It sounds so fake and blah, blah, blah. And then I go, I'll look at all the blacklist scripts, and I'll look at those log lines, and those aren't good concepts, blah, blah, blah. All this, artistic resistance, right? Which is fine. And yet, as I've learned to really embrace and even love the log line, it's such a great tool. It's so amazingly helpful in writing a script, making a movie, pitching the movie, or even selling it. And all we do all day long is sell our own movie. So the fact that I can tell you that, the way I pitched, Snowfall, the alien invasion movie,
mm-hmm.
was, a group of commuters stuck on the L train in Chicago during a storm. During the blizzard, only the blizzard's a cover for an alien invasion. So it's concise, it's clear, and that's not an accident. I mean, that was, back when I started, that's the first thing I do. I bang out a log line, and now I'm good at it, so I can usually get it in the ballpark within 10 minutes. But when I was first starting to do that, it was really, really hard. But Blake's ideas about how to break it down and to bring in some sort of irony or twist in it is really,
mm-hmm.
really helpful. And the thing to do when you pitch is give them that. Give them the concept. Give them the sense of what the poster is. And then if there's interest, then you reveal more, and then you unpack more, and then you go from there. But it's that conversation that you're having with the room, whatever the room is, and you want those cues, because they might not even like that genre. And then you go, okay, you don't like sci-fi? I've got this other one. And then you pitch that one, or whatever. So, but if you're not able to very concisely, first of all, think of your movie in a concept, in a log line, it makes it from my experience as a screenwriter, very, very difficult to write a cohesive screenplay. Now, there's lots of people that do it, and it's fine, and it's because they have an innate sense of cohesiveness. But mine, I didn't have that, and I think most people probably don't. And it's a learnable skill. And then what happens is, as I go out and I actually, let's say I'm writing my new spec, and a spec is a script that's written on speculation to be sold to somebody money for. And as I'm doing that, I start with that log line, I start with that concept, and then I flesh it out a little bit to maybe a beginning, middle, and end, and then I flesh it out to a few pages, and then I flesh it out further. But it enables me to kind of look at the feedback that I'm getting, and looking how is it hitting people, how is it, and then I can test it against the wind, right from the beginning, and flesh it out that way, as opposed to when I first started, right, it was like I had an idea and I'd write it out, and it's so much, my process is so much more efficient and focused, and I'm hitting, and it's so more, and it's just much more aligned with what Hollywood is looking for in terms of the execution of a story, if that makes sense. But it all comes down to that log line and that kernel of a concept. And one of the things I really liked about the work I've seen from you and the things that you've been doing is you've really taken that idea of licensing and the theme of a story, and you've brought it into premium services for movies. I think for independent filmmakers, which I think is really interesting, and I think relates to how well a storyteller knows what that kernel of the concept of their idea is, because theme is very much involved in that seed of the idea.
Yeah. There's a great quote from Leo Burnett, who was like David Ogilvy's like hero. There's like an ad guy from like the early 1900s, or and in teaching his ad agency, like his number one rule is like there is an inherent drama in every product, and our number one job is to dig for it and capitalize on it. So I thought that was really fascinating because, from like an ad agency's perspective, they have to create story around a product. And so it's fun watching Mad Men because you could see them at, at certain episodes try to dig into what the heart of the story was for this particular product. And we have filmmakers, we have this film, and there is a theme, or there should be a theme. And like, is that theme something that could be capitalized on in terms of amplified or exploited more? That could be the seed for the licensing, this be seed for the added value market to help beyond just selling your film online for a given price of like 99 cents. Yeah. So, yeah. But it's I only have like maybe like 10 more minutes with you, but I really would love to get into like what are the things that have you seen, like you not to say you were able to crack the code, you were like you and your writing partner, you got signed by UTA. I mean, obviously that emotionally that must have been really just like exciting, like wow, this is actually happening, and then the whole process of getting it sold and knowing that it's a long process, but it's the film should be in production very soon, and you're working on a new film. Because you're like you said, your rhythm is like I gotta go. This one's Montauk Highway, and I could tell a little about that. But before we do that, I was curious on the writing part of it. Of all your stuff that you've evolved with, what are the fun like things that you shouldn't do? It's like it's always fun like to hear people go, well, that you should do this, but here's like the things that you really shouldn't do. And maybe kind of throwing you a curveball right at the spur of the moment.
No, that's fine. Things I suggest people should not do when they're writing or independent filmmaking, or in which particular area?
I think the writing and like just I think for a lot of independent filmmakers, like they're writing something because they can write it, and a lot of them have the means to just take up a camera or a small crew, a small like funding that they have, and they just make it, as opposed to maybe spending more time on the story. Like maybe how does the uber independent filmmaker like check themselves to make sure that the story is as great as it can be? Like maybe is yeah.
I love that question because it's really, really, really hard. It's it goes so okay, I'm an independent filmmaker. I've written a script. Is it any good? Right? I get feedback, but here's the thing. Films are subjective. Avatar, worldwide the biggest movie of all time. There are people who hate it. There are people who think it's terrible. People, just they wouldn't see it. They have no interest in it, right? So let's say I wrote Avatar, and and one of these guys who happens to hate Avatar before he knows it is one of my friends, and I give him the script, and he's like, "This is terrible. Don't make it." You know what I mean? So that can happen, and then and the same thing happens with the most critically acclaimed movie of all time. Might be like Godfather or Citizen Kane or something like that. Let's say I write that script, hypothetically, and I send that to my friend, and my friend happens to be the guy who hates that sort of movie. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. On the other hand, the other thing is completely a problem. Let's say if I say, you know what, screw everybody, I like this script. If I like it, I'm going to make it. Go ahead, boom. It's like a journal entry in a sense. The problem with that is it could be terrible, and it could be terrible in a way that, had I heard the right kind of feedback in the right way, I would have said, oh, you know what? Yeah, I actually wasn't intending that. I meant something different, and now I can change it, and I like it even better. Mm-hmm. So you're losing the opportunity to make it even better for yourself if you go out too quickly. and you're losing, you might lose your whole nerve to even make it if you give it feedback and get the wrong kind of feedback and don't know how to process the feedback. So it's really difficult, and that doesn't really go away. I mean, you can get, at least in my experience, I definitely have two things. One is I know what kind of feedback I can get from some people. I love feedback from laymen. I love feedback from professionals. I love feedback from producers. And I expect different things from those people, and I don't ask them for other than what they have. You know, some people give in-depth notes. Some people say thumbs up or down, you know, and it's fine. I get the feedback that I need. And I also, on a personal level, have grown to love feedback because, and not because I want everybody to agree with me. I do want people to agree with me, but it's not going to always happen. So, but what I do want is when I disagree, it has to feel right. You know, so when I give my script to somebody and they go, well, I don't like A, B, and C, and I feel how that feels that they don't like it, and if I go, you know what, I agree, and now I want to change it and make it better, or I listen, I go, oh, you know what, yeah, that's a different movie, and that's not the one that I want to make, and then I say thank you for the feedback, and I ignore it and I move on. So, so what not to answer the question, what not to do is don't rush it out too quickly. And also don't get feedback from the wrong people and believe them and let them knock you off your vision and your path and what you love for it, you know. And so I'll say one last thing to kind of bring this home is you know, you take your favorite movies of all time or even this year or whatever, and you talk to some of your closest friends, we're going to disagree about those movies. You know, for me, one of my favorite movies of all time is Boyhood, and that was maybe one of the best reviewed movies of all time. But my wife was bored. You know?
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't crazy about it. You know, and there's a lot of people who was kind of like, yeah, whatever. It was too subtle. It was too whatever. And you know what? I get that. That's awesome. And so, so it's being true to my vision, not just in isolation, but in the strong winds of the business and the greater public. So when I hear the types of criticism, I get a sense of the type of trolls that will come at me, and I get a sense of all the stuff that people aren't going to like about it, and I still love my movie. Then it's the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious if like you've seen like certain other writers having sort of systems in place to create that sort of checks and balance, you know, with beneficial critique of the story. And you know, we look at television and the writer's room, and I think there's some just amazing stuff being made in television, the golden age right now. There's so much, you know, amazing content coming out, and I don't know whether or not the writer's room allows that ability, you know, so that it's the checks and balance to try to bring the best forward. Or in Pixar, they are renowned for this concept of like the brain trust group, where the creatives get together and everybody hammers at the story, but the person who's responsible for the script doesn't have to take any of the advice or input. It's just there as like a session so that they can determine on their own what needs to be fixed. Apparently I'm trying to get somebody from Pixar to come on so I can get the inside scoop of how they operate. But I was curious if, as independents, if we could apply that to our own writing process. So like you said, we're not in that place where the independent is writing. And it's like a few people said, yeah, it's great. And then they go, yep, making it, you know. and then you're like, it could have been better, you know.
Yeah, it's important. The thing is that what we want to know as independent filmmakers, when we're doing everything ourselves and we're going to basically put it out there and try to make money off it ourselves, we need to be at peace with how people are not going, what they're not going to like about it, and if what they don't like about it is the same thing they don't like about my favorite films anyway, perfect.
Yeah, I gotcha.
That makes sense. And so, but that feedback process is very, very important. It can be from collaborators. It can be from, people that you work with, your DP or whoever. It could be from a writers group. I've been in a writers group I founded one in LA, I don't know, 15 years ago, and it's been huge. It's been huge for me and for everybody involved because it's a safe place to be like, well, you know, and we in that group, really prides ourselves on graceful honesty. because if it's not honest, you're not really going to help somebody. And if it's not graceful, you could really knock them off track. You know? So that brutal honesty, like, this sucks, you should know that, I'm doing you a favor, is ridiculous, because it puts it really puts the creative process, it knocks it off track, you know. But if you're saying, oh, this is the best and blah, 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 and that's not true, then that doesn't help them. So graceful honesty with feedback when you're giving it is a great intention, and seeking out people who can do that, you know. I mean, to me, there's almost a thrill I get when I can really hate somebody's film or script or whatever and still give them inspiring feedback. Mm-hmm. To me, that's awesome as a feedbacker and as a creative, because what I'm doing is I'm separating. I don't have a need as a fan or as whatever to. They don't have to agree with me, and they don't have to even take my ideas, you know. But if they're coming to me for feedback, and I like them as a person, as a colleague, I really want them to be inspired, you know. And sometimes that means, you know what, this whole kind of premise is kind of messed up. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be a musical. It shouldn't be or whatever. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. That being said, sometimes I wouldn't say that. So just because I'm into graceful honesty, if their film is playing at the festival and it's that night, I don't give them any sort of feedback. I just slap them on the back and say congratulations. You know,
it's done.
If they're not in the position to change anything, do not share that, because that's inappropriate. So anyway, I have a whole lot of thinking about great feedback giving and getting, because it can be masterful and it can be an absolute travesty, and I'm sure most people have felt both.
I totally agree. I think that's from great advice. Now, listen, we have 3 more minutes, so I want to just wrap it up. I want you to, you actually sent me like you used to offer like a story blog or like a screenwriting blog, and you have some great notes. So I'll offer that in the show notes. Everybody can get hold of those. But you're also in the throes, because you have to get off this phone call soon to have an investor call for your new film, Montauk Highway. If you can kind of tell us a little bit about that film, and before we sign off.
I'd love to. So, as I mentioned before, I grew up in East Hampton, and it's the place that's known to most people as the Hamptons. Mm-hmm. So I always thought it was a perfect place to tell a class conflict love story, and to show a different side of the Hamptons that people are familiar with. So it's an edgy coming of age story set in the Hamptons against the tensions between the locals and the summer crowd. And we've got an amazing cast, and I'm so darn excited to make this thing. People can follow it at Montauk Highway on Twitter, like Montauk_Highway. Just put Montauk Highway; it should pop up, or me on Twitter at Brooks Elms, and that's the best way to kind of stay up to date. I want to talk about the cast, but we haven't. But there's still a few official things to close, and then we announce.
Right.
But I love them, and I love where this thing's going. It's going to be, it's my hometown film. So, and actually, I have pitch clips on it. If anybody's interested, they can, until we make them public, you can reach out to me, and then I can give you the password, and you can check it out. But they should be public fairly soon. But things have to close. So, anyway, I'm excited about it, it's a way for me to kind of, because growing up in East Hampton, we saw the mansions and the famous people and all that, and we had a sense of sort of insecurity. So, in a sense, for me, it's a sort of validation of my dignity that I felt that I questioned myself when I lived there. So, it's that idea of super personal and super classic. I mean, we've seen a million class conflict love stories, and these are from Romeo and Juliet and whatever. Mm-hmm. But the idea, and everybody knows the Hamptons, but they don't know this side of it. So it's really, I think, a great way. And the other thing is because I'm directing it myself, my earlier films were after I got to the NYU period, were very personal. And then when I was writing in Hollywood, I've been writing very broad. And so this is a great way to kind of take my personal sensibility as a director and the screenwriting talents that I've developed since then. It's all coming together, and I think it's going to be a really special film. So I'm so excited about it.
I'm excited for you, and I'm excited we'll keep track of how Snowfall, as we see it in the trades, as it gets made. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and
Thank you.
just some great insight, just in taking us through the journey, because I know a lot of filmmakers want, you're further down the timeline from a lot of people where they want to be. So it's fantastic to hear where you're going, and I'm excited for your film, my friend. So Montauk Highway.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it.
So that concludes my interview with filmmaker and writer Brooks Elms. You can find out all the details over at filmtrooper.com/104, because this is episode number 104. So all the show notes, all the links to everything that he's working on, and all the articles that we were discussing will be there for you. Again, that's filmtrooper.com/104 to get a little bit more detail than what you're hearing here in the podcast. If you like the podcast, think about leaving a ratings and review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio or on Google Play. I think it's almost ready to be available on Google Play or wherever you listen to podcasts. Think about leaving a ratings review. It definitely helps. I appreciate it. But don't go away empty-handed, because, listen, if you are a filmmaker who's stuck trying to make their film right now, then I can offer you a free gift over at freegearguide.com. That's freegearguide.com, and you'll get an equipment list of everything that I use to make a feature film for $500 without a crew. Again, that's at freegearguide.com. That's it for now. Thank you so much for checking in to the Film Trooper podcast, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Film Trooper, filmmaking freedom for the independent.